Welcome back to the I'm Booked podcast. I'm here today with Dr. Tom Hudson. Welcome, Dr. Tom.
Thanks. Hi, April.
So glad you're here. Tom and I have a lot to share today, and we're really excited to be talking about his brand new book called Something Deeper 31 Spiritual Poems, if you can see it here, to help you navigate life. And you can get this on Amazon or Barnes and Noble on his website, Thomas Hudson MD. And he is a radiologist and has a really beautiful, beautiful writing practice of poetry. So let's talk about poetry and radiology and how did those two worlds converge for you?
Wow. It's hard to even it's hard to even know really. The writing, they seemed separate really forever, kind of. The writing process was really my own kind of quiet time, my own meditation time, really. That's I realized over time that writing is how I process life, really.
Mm.
And so I would start by asking questions. Why is this happening? Whatever it is. And then suddenly or over time, you realize you're tapping into another, whatever you want to call it, whatever is sort of bigger than you or your deeper wisdom or something other than your logical brain.
Yeah.
You see value in what you're writing. That really was a very weird, odd experience at first. Like,
Yeah.
what is this? That's not me. I can't think of that. So, but in time I got used to it. It was really beautiful. It was a quiet, safe place I could go,
Mm.
to talk about anything, to ask any questions, to deal with anything, to do. It was just a very, very safe place. And
Mm.
I really did that separately, really. Um,
Well, how
and
did
I,
it begin for you? Because the process of writing so deeply, I mean, your book is called Something Deeper, but it really is true that you were able to tap into this inner voice or inner dialogue, way of perceiving life that's much deeper and makes life a lot more meaningful. But I think that that's something that, I don't know, did you stumble upon it? Did you just start one day after a stressful day and just decide you were going to start writing? I know you wrote some in your childhood and you
Mhm.
shared a little bit about that. You want to tell everyone about maybe some of those experiences because I think that gift of writing has simmered and then lost its voice for a little while.
Yes, I used to write a lot. I was the first thing I ever remember loving to do. When I was a kid, I would sit in my room and write stories all the time about whatever. And then was going to publish them. I won't go through the whole story, but I was sent a bunch off in the Kleenex box, at least I thought. And then it turned out, my dad found them and we had a back and forth. It's like, okay, nobody's going to publish those. I'm going to forget about this. So I did for decades and decades. And then, kind of in the middle of a crisis, which, dark times, difficult times really spur a lot of us right onto, it opens other doors that I think when we're cruising through life, we kind of don't take the time or see the need to really open other doors. But when you're struggling a little bit, um, those deep things kind of come back to you. So that's what I found. I was sort of struggling and I found the writing again. And in a in a deeper and different way. I know it did seem almost like an accident. I remember because I was spiritually seeking and just what's
Mhm.
life all about? There's got to be more than this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And somebody suggested, hey, why don't you write your prayers down? I think I saw it in a book somewhere. And
Okay.
I went, I never thought of that. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So that's really, I would say, the second time. It was my awakenings after this writing had been dormant for literally decades. And
Mm.
I started doing that and it evolved. In the beginning, it was kind of simple and I don't even remember much about the beginning because I've been doing it so long now after
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
But it was a whole different thing. It was a whole, can I say, it was like this epiphany of like, wow, suddenly there's this other voice. Is that me? What is that? I don't know what this is, but I know I like it.
Yeah.
And it's making my life better. And for me, when I write, writing is important because it slows my mind down.
Mm.
Putting
Yeah.
it on paper slows my mind down, and I can try
Mhm.
to meditate and do all these other things, and I can do them, but it doesn't work as well as the writing for me. It's
Mm.
really a form of meditation for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so
So did you find that once you picked the pen back up, and I love that you said somebody said or you read in a book that just write your prayers down. It's like, huh, never thought of that, And I love how all of a sudden, we get this idea from somewhere and then at the right time, maybe you read that or heard that many times before, who knows? But it's like in that moment, it meant something, you started, and now you've developed this practice. And I've witnessed you real time continue to create. And, your book is a collaboration of a lot of your best poetry, but that doesn't mean that you don't have eons and eons more and more that just comes to you. So it's become this beautiful spiritual practice for you. So, how often do you find yourself going back and slowing down and writing?
I find it really goes in waves almost. There are times when I just write every night, all the time. And then there are times when life is busier or I have other things on my mind or whatever, and I don't write for a period of time, weeks
Hmm.
or whatever. I do have, sometimes I just type it right on the
Yeah.
laptop,
Yeah.
but more often I just sit in my quiet chair with the light. It's usually dark. It's usually either early in the morning or late at night.
Hmm.
And I just write. I put a pen on paper and
Hmm.
I just keep writing. It's like this flight of ideas.
Yeah.
And I put a date on it. And I've got a dozen of those big, thick books like that. And I try to keep some kind of order to it so I can go back and find some of these things. Because as I'm reading them, I'm going, wow, this is really good. I need to put this out there. Or really how it happened that I shared it with other people was I would write these things, some of them, and think, wow, so and so is going through something similar. I bet this would really speak to them.
Mm.
So I would type it up and share it with them. And I was really amazed at the feedback that I got. It really, really, really spoke to them. So it was almost like I was getting really messages for them. Um, and I had a small group of friends and family that were open to it that I would share with it. So that was my hugest encouragement, that
Mm.
it like really touched people. They said, "Oh, this is exactly what I needed to hear, like exactly when I needed to hear it." So,
Yeah.
um, so I started doing some of that. I did that for a very long time. And as we've talked about before, it's like people said, "Oh, this is great. You should publish this." Yeah, yeah, no, I get it. That's good. I think it's good. But but you don't really often, as we were just discussing, right? You have your inner critic and people tell you things are good, but you don't always exactly believe it. Um,
Hmm.
and then shortly before I met you, reached out to you because we had a mutual friend.
Hmm.
I handed one or two out and they just got such over the top responses. I sent one to one of the technologists, and she just was over the moon. Can I share this with all the docs? Can I share this with all the staff here? And another one was about my neighbor walking her dog and being grateful, and the depth of that. And I was really taken aback that the response was so deep and so strong just in these two particular ones. And I thought, maybe the universe is just telling me it's time. Maybe it's just time, because I started to feel the response was so wonderful and so heartfelt. And when you make a difference in people's lives like that, it's just so heartwarming. There's almost nothing better.
Yeah.
And it really convinced me that, I kind of have a duty to put these out there if people really are getting that much out of them.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
and
amazing how the universe will bring back to us again and again and again these reminders of the things that we're doing that are great, that are impacting others. And I do believe that whatever God there is, that we are the ones who can take the action in the actual human world on the behalf of whatever higher spirit there is, right? And so this is just my belief, but I think that you and your ability to write and get in touch with that voice and then giving those messages out is a way for them to hear from God, to get something in their spirit lit up. And I think you were seeing that over and over to the point where your inner critic just had to like shut up.
yeah, yeah,
You had collected enough evidence over time that, hey, maybe these are pretty good.
yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I think your purpose or God or whatever it is, it kind of just taps you on the shoulder, and you can ignore it for a very long time, but the tapping only gets to more incessant,
Yeah.
and if you're trying to live life from a spiritual perspective, again, whatever that is to people, it's slightly different to everybody, but whatever that is, that we as humans have access to, right? That then to me, that's, in a way, it's almost just science. I mean, you can call it spirit if you want, but it's also science in that we are built such that intuition is real, and we're not limited to our five senses. So whatever that other sense is, and whatever we're connected to, it has messages for us.
Yeah.
And it really is what connects us to other people, and
Yeah.
there's almost nothing better to me to get something, and when I write it and I feel it and I have a person in mind. I'm not writing it for them particularly, but sometimes I have a person in mind and I can write it and I feel it. It's like I'm privileged to take part in it. And even the editing and do I need this sentence? Do I need that sentence? I put in a different paragraph. Even the minute things like that are such a joy for me.
Yeah.
And then to give it to them and have them, I mean, I have people cry all the time. Um, so to be a conduit for that, just as a human, to connect with that something bigger and be a conduit and watch the effect it has on somebody else, there's almost nothing better, really.
Yeah.
And it's like we all do it in a different way,
Yeah.
but why else are we here, kind of?
Yeah. Yeah, it's I mean, I could end this podcast right now because I think if you're listening, you got everything you need to know about life and about your gifts. And I think, not everyone's gifts are writing like yours is, but I think that the universal principle that we're all here to help one another evolve in some way or see things differently or be united. And I think the universal human experience, which is what your poetry's a lot about, it takes
Mhm.
the day-to-day things of life that could easily just be missed in the busyness. And I always view your poetry, I have described it before to others as like if I had an actual knob where I could make life go slower or speed it up
Mhm.
to go faster, your poem's ability to make life slow down, to not miss what's right in front of us and to find that extraordinary experience in the ordinary, I think is exceptionally rare. And especially in the busy world we have where it's phone, text, social media, faster this and, it's almost overwhelming. And So for somebody to even know that you wrote something and that you even had them in mind, maybe
Mhm.
after the poem was written, is such a gift too. So, one of the things that's so unique about your poetry, and I'll hold it up here to the camera for those who are listening on audio, you won't be able to see what I'm showing, but his poems are very symmetrical. So the visual nature of what he's done is something that I think is unique to his poetry. And we talked about the importance of him talking about that at the beginning of the book and how that came to light as he was writing. So tell us a bit about the idea of 3D poetry.
Well, that was something that truly just happened. Um, I don't even
That's the
know.
amazing part of it is it's like it just happened.
It just happened. As I look back, the things I remember is like my mom told me I always liked making puzzles, putting together puzzles. I remember that's just something I didn't remember that, but something that she said. And really, when you think about radiology, when we get into that, the different imaging tests, and it's slightly different than this one, and how do they go together? You can tell this from this one or this from that one, but how they fit together to make an overall picture is essentially a puzzle. So essentially, my career is really solving puzzles. We got a chest x-ray. I think it means this. We need a CAT scan. Okay, the CAT scan tells me this. We need an MRI. Or no, I can tell now. So there's that aspect and interest. I was never a big video game guy, right? That was my kids are. But one of the ones that I really loved was Tetris. I don't know if people remember
I
Tetris, but
love Tetris. Yes.
I just was crazy about Tetris.
Oh,
Little
yes. And
falling
you can rotate it
rectangles,
around. Yeah.
squares, and you can turn it around and make it
Yep.
all fit. I was just one of the two really that I just couldn't get enough of. And as I think about it, that's what really it sort of, again, I don't remember even the first time that I did that. I think I was writing things that rhymed initially. I don't even know if I have any of those anymore. And then I evolved to not rhyming them. And I don't even remember the first time I did it, but I started just making shapes out of it. Probably it was accidental at first. And I thought, hey, that looks pretty cool. And it just it became such that the shape was almost not as important as what I said, but the shape became part of it. And as you know, I spent so much time on the symmetry of everything. And I only as we finished the book after the fact, and I was thinking back about it, and we called it 3D poetry because it's similar to us, right? Mind, body, spirit, and um, just different. It just brought a depth, I felt like, to the poetry, even if people didn't maybe overtly recognize it or consciously recognize it. There was some of the symmetries to me were just so beautiful
Hmm.
and and made such very interesting shapes. I mean, all different kind of semicircular almost, some of them, and rectangular, and I just realized that, oh, there's something deeper than just the writing. And it just added a depth to it that's hard to kind of explain exactly. But even though I realized it made it much harder because the words, I had to pick out exactly the right word.
Yes.
And well, the words make sense, but sentence is too long. As you know, we drove the editors crazy.
Our editorial team was very, very um, meticulous with Dr. Tom in the trenches trying to help figure this out, but it was like charting uncharted territory, really, because
Yeah,
this is something I don't think that's been done before.
no, I don't think so. And neither one of us, nobody really realized it until we
Right.
got to the editing.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, no, I agree with that exactly, but it doesn't fit. Well, but doesn't look good. It's editorially correct, but it doesn't look.
Yes. Right.
Got to say it
So
different.
yes, it was a difficult process, and I will say that for those who are writers or creatives, the editorial process is that sort of like a meticulous cleanup that can be a little arduous, and especially when you're creative and you're in touch with your intuitive side and spiritual, it can be the thing that can be really infuriating at times. But in the end, when you get through to the other side, you feel like, okay, now we got it. But during the process, I remember we even created some rules and things that would work for your poetry that might be non-standard for other poetry formats. And so I think that that was interesting too, because that's part of the creativity that I love about writing and especially poetry is it's like you're in a blank canvas with paints and paintbrushes, and people can't say, "Well, you can't stroke the paper like that," or "You can't use that much red," or "You should do it this or that way," because as the artist, you get to do it how you want to do it. And so you were able to take this 3D poetry format, and we were able to invent some rules around how things were going to work and what was going to be capitalized and how punctuation was going to be worked so that it worked throughout the whole book. And I think that in the end, although there was a lot of back and forth in trying to figure it out, that it made the work um, really shine. Like it's so powerful. And when Dr. Tom's saying that people cry reading his poetry. I'm telling you, every time I read his book almost, and I've read it multiple times, and I can open at random, I still cry when I read his poems. So this is a book that is like sparking alive the spirit within you. And I think that's like it's like this living being that you created. I don't know if you realize that. I'm sure you do,
I
but
think
that's
so. I still cry when I read them.
yeah,
And not only did I write them, but I probably read some of them 1,000 times, parts of them going over, poring over. Do you put an and? Do you put an actually? I don't
yeah,
need the actually editorially, but I need the actually to make it look good. And so I literally maybe read a couple of them 1,000 times.
yeah,
And it's a thing that amazes me about writing is if I really connect with spirit and I connect and I what do I say? It's again, you asked how it goes together with what I do, right? So I'm a radiologist. So I interpret images of the inside of you, right? Not
mm,
images of the outside of you. CAT scan, anything, hip X-ray, mammogram is what I specialize in, but I'm trained to do it all. I've done it all. And to describe that accurately so that a doctor not looking at the image can get a mental picture. That's my job. I've done it for decades. And this is really very similar. It's a spiritual aspect of that. It's seeing the something deeper. It's seeing the inside and capturing that, right? Capturing the emotion of it. And if I'm really plugged in when I'm writing, I find that that is alive in the writing. It transfers in the writing. Somehow that spirit goes on, and that's what makes me feel great about like sort of a duty to really put it on paper because some of the authors that have inspired me that I can feel the emotion have been dead for 60 years.
yeah.
I want to say Ernest Holmes, I think, is a big one, and he wrote most of his stuff in the 1960s.
Hmm.
And the fact that you can feel, so it's not a feel, or Alan Watts is another one I love, who
I
was
was just reading his book last night, the book.
he's fantastic,
Yes.
and to hear him speak, and you feel the spirit.
Hmm.
But all that's left, he's been gone for a very long time. All that's left is the little vibrations on the tape, or however the physics of how it happens now, or the words on the page. But they can make you feel something much deeper and they've been gone for so long. So that's what the biggest joy I get from writing is when other people feel what I wrote. Once it's on the paper, um, or even if that's not the genre, right? Once
Point, and it's something that it's a tricky thing to discuss, but of course we're all going to be leaving this planet at some point of the end of our human experience. And I say, what is going to outlive you? You know, if you've got a lot of money, maybe you leave a trust for your kids. We heard a talk the other day at our local Toastmasters meeting about even that after 3 generations is gone usually. But a book is something that will live on. I mean, you think about a lot of the works that are still around from the 1800s or 1700s, and the Bible, which is, one of the most read books around the world, has been around for however many thousands, 2000 years.
yeah,
And so to me, it really does become this living, breathing thing that will be exist much beyond any of our human experiences. And I think that's really exciting to know that this book that I've written or that I've helped publish, that could impact someone 100 years from now that we'll never meet. And
yeah,
that they could be saying on a podcast, whatever it's going to be a podcast 100 years from now, probably not a podcast, going to be virtual reality. I don't know. But that poetry by Dr. Tom Hudson, you'll be like the Alan Watts.
yeah, yeah. No, that's very moving to me, really. And even as I write, because that's what I spend my time with in
Hmm.
that realm, and it's that bigger perspective, because a bigger perspective, like we're not going to be here forever and those kinds of things, really, it's what makes us, it's what makes life more joyful. The
Yeah.
larger the perspective we have, and you can put any definition on it you care to put on it. But I think the more reality is, it's reality, and it's how we're created or whatever to exist, to keep that large perspective. And culture, culture and jobs and all that just sort of necessarily draw that focus down. So when I write and I feel like I'm plugged in, there's one
Right.
one day about plugging in, right?
Yes.
Like, yeah, I have it all together. Well, people think I have it all together. Well, I do while I'm writing, but otherwise I have to remember what I wrote, or I just slog through like everybody else. So it's a matter of plugging into that.
Mm.
And yeah, I'm just amazed that when I plug into that, even though it's physical ink on paper, right, in a physical book, that whatever I plugged into and whatever I was feeling, that other people feel the same. They can just read these words on a page, which are material nothing, and feel that same.
Hmm.
So that's always, I've always been fascinated by how the universe works.
Yeah.
Not in a physics way or a mathematical way, but just how does it work that spirit, that whatever it is that made me cry and made you cry and makes other people cry can transfer through a book.
Hmm.
But it does. It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And the other thing,
Crazy, right? When you think about it that way, it's like kind of mind blowing.
it's mind blowing. And I can tell when when I start writing, that's well, I have to be careful a little bit. So it's my wife laughs at me. It's sort of the joke, right? It's like 9:30 at night. I don't want to quite go to bed yet. Um, I'll write a little bit, just sort of settle down. I've been working a lot. I'm just going to write a little bit. It's 1 o'clock in the morning
Yeah.
by the time I finish, and I have to get up, and I don't even want to quit at 1 o'clock because you enter, in my opinion, we're entering life. That's real life. That's what's real, because, and you can tell because it's timeless.
Mm-hmm.
Time doesn't exist in that place. Time is a mental construct.
Mm-hmm.
Even quantum physics. I love quantum physics, again, not for the math. I can't do it math wise, but conceptually, there's no difference between quantum physics and going to you know, in anything spiritual, it kind of explains how the spiritual works, right?
Mhm.
Largely. And there isn't any time there, is the thing. So, and like you say, I contemplate this when I'm writing, and I could like stay there forever. If I could like
Mhm.
kind of write forever, it doesn't work that way. At
Yeah.
some point, you
Yeah.
have to eat and drink and have a job and
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah.
But I think of things just like you said, like, wow, my neighbor walked by with her dog and she said she was grateful. And I'm like, well, grateful for what? Well, what? And that spurred a whole writing. Well, what if she didn't walk by? Was she meant to walk by? Why this time? I've seen her 20 other times walking her dog, and it does get you to think of these existential questions. And I write and I'm thinking, my beautiful grandkids, um, this is going to be a big deal to them someday. Someday, they
Yeah.
may be 50 years old
I know. I mean, what a gift to give
and
your
they're going to open
grandkids.
this book
Yeah.
and go,
Yeah.
oh my God, my,
Yes.
grandpa did that. I mean, they're decades away from that, but I
Yeah.
don't even have to be here. It's going to totally touch their hearts. And it comes out in such different ways. Like you were asking about the Book to Naples event, right? And the thing was your encouragement. The thing that my talk was part of it was I read about some time that I had with my grandkids in Italy and how beautiful it was. And it was very mean. When I read it, I felt the same way as being with them. And so did other people. And I can't wait to send the video out because I'm gonna tell them, hey, look, I made Nicole and Maya famous.
Yeah.
But they may not even, I don't think they'll be able to really grasp the depth of all of that for decades. I may not even
Mhm.
be.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
So
just
it's putting, yeah, it's putting something together now that generations from now may be discovered by your kids, kids, kids.
yeah,
And they'll have it, because they even say too, when mentioned about the trust that ends after 3 generations, but you think about how far back, like my dad and then his dad, my Papa Ike, and I vaguely know his parents were farmers in Iowa.
yeah,
But I don't and they had 12 children. I don't really know anything about them though, but I can only imagine if he had written a book about farm life back then, or poetry about what he was thinking about back then, or how amazingly precious that would be to have. It would be a peek inside a whole nother world.
yeah. I mean, you'd see how humanity is all connected, and we're connected to generations that came before us, even though we don't think we are.
Yeah.
And then you see, that's why I love listening to Alan Watts and Ernest Holmes, reading his stuff, because you realize, wow, they're not even here, and I feel like I know them so well.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, all it seemed like ancient times, right? Because the technology was so different and this and that and this and that. But you realize, no, the human experience is the human experience. And they were wrestling with the same things we wrestle with. It just looks different because technology's different.
Right.
It just starts to, I don't know. It's right. It's like I keep saying we're all connected, but we really are connected.
Yeah.
We really are. And when we forget that, that's when all the goofiness happens, right? That's when all the political stuff happens and this religion and that religion and all that. It's the forget that we're all the same, right? We're different flavors of the same ice cream. But we when you remember that, life is beautiful. I mean, it's really like unspeakably beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about synchronicities and but all of life is a synchronicity. We think we're doing great if we pick up 3 coincidences, right, in a week, or, oh gosh, I've had just a spiritually unbelievable week because, like, my neighbor and her dog. who happened to run by. Then I wrote a whole thing about gratitude and how special it is and how you know what a big deal it was and how her walking by my front door one night touched how many people because it's in the book.
Yeah. I know
And
it's really unbelievable, right? It's really unbelievable, and I think that the 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 words point to something much bigger beyond you that you're able to tap into. And so I think that's what you're so um exceptionally good at, is that it's not about you. You're the one doing the writing. You're the one taking the time to plug in, but you realize that if the words are touching me and your neighbor and your son and your, generations to come, it's because you have been sourcing from something much larger than yourself. And I think that's
yes,
the beauty in all of it, is that that does show how connected we all are.
yeah, and it really, yeah, I mean, it's sort of like tears are like the standard thing when you really feel it. Honestly, when you really feel the bigness of how small we really are and how big everything really is, and how we think all these things are accidents, right, in our life. And it's like, oh, guess what? They're not. Because
Mhm.
even when I wasn't writing, right, I've been a radiologist for 40 some years now, more than that if you count residency and whatnot. So I have been looking at pictures, describing what I see. This is slightly larger than, right? Do I say it's minimally larger than it was last time, or it's bigger, right? There's the nuances of the words that I use. I can look at the same image and make somebody sound like they're dying, or I can make them sound like, meh, it's something a little off. And I've seen all these different reports depending on how people do it. But if I do it well, people can read what I write. They can look at the image later and go, oh, this is perfect. No, this is exactly the image I had in mind. So my job is to describe things in such a nuanced way that somebody not,
Well, that is the answer to my very first question. We
yes,
have arrived,
yes, I didn't even
because
realize it.
that is true. You have been trained to be very specific with language because language conveys meaning. So if something's slightly larger, or if something is drastically larger, if something's the size of a pea versus a kidney bean versus a golf ball, those all have meaning. I know that's probably not how you describe it, but so your training and ability to be very specific with your words has translated into this totally spiritual realm.
Yes, and I didn't even know it, right? I didn't even see that for the longest time. But I'm very visual. So often I'll see pictures in my head, and I just really describe what I see. And much of it has to do with emotion. So I describe what I feel also. But it's very, very detailed because that's what I've learned how to do. And I remember the first few times when somebody's in tears and just thanking me so profusely for this thing that I wrote for them. And I thought, wow, I have the ability through my writing to make people feel how I felt, what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
You know, I can transmit that just by the way I write. And that was a big epiphany for me.
Mhm.
I thought, wow, that's
Yeah.
pretty deep.
That's very deep, and it's beautiful that you have taken what you have done professionally for so long to help people with their health, and to help people hopefully make the right choices about their health, because you've chosen the right words to be able to help them make those decisions. And you've translated that into spiritual poetry to help people navigate their life, and that to me, that's the perfect, kind of evolution of taking that same skill in two different ways, but both to help people. And that's really what your heart is all about. Seeing you on stage at Book Naples, talking about your grandkids and reading that poem and how connected people were with you in that moment was beautiful. And, our book launch, when we did that over Zoom and how many people came on to express their love for who you are, and all that you have imparted to them over the years was just beautiful. And I don't want to neglect to talk about the cover of your book and how you were so careful in choosing that. And we went through, our designer put together some designs, but there was one image you really had in mind, and you really fought for that image, and I think it was the right one in the end. And I want you to talk about that and how that all played out on the book launch, because that was just a moment I'll never forget. I'll
Yeah.
never forget that moment. Yeah.
um, yeah, it's how, whatever you call it, messages, intuition, whatever, that's how it works. Because you remember, typically, I remember I was getting some dinner from takeout, and I was turning left right before my community, and I knew I saw the picture of the book cover in my head. I'm pretty sure, along with the title, because I didn't know the title at that point. And it's like, that's it. Because I didn't think of it. I wasn't like poring over I just saw this image. I went, that's it.
Mhm.
So my son it was a daughter of a good friend of ours. And I'll make the story short because it's a convoluted story. But the
Yeah.
daughter of a good friend of ours is super creative. She was 10 years old at the time, and she's just super, super creative. And it came to me to just ask her to just describe this to her, and I figured she'll get it. She is in touch with this different realm. She's so talented at it that literally at 10 it's almost a problem. So, but she's so connected to that realm. I thought she'll get it. She'll get what I am trying to go for.
Yeah.
So she did, and then she painted this thing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like 90% of exactly what I wanted. And we did some little tweaks, and
Mhm.
um, and that basically that's the book cover. So it was a 10-year-old girl that did the book cover, and she was on the book launch. She didn't know. Once I knew that that was going to be the cover, I told my friend, don't tell her until the book comes out. So she found out that night on the book launch. And I mean, she went nuts. I mean, she really did.
It
Oh, does
was
this mean I'm famous?
unbelievable.
Yeah, does this mean I'm famous? I thought it was
Yeah.
just
It was the most precious thing when I remember, I'll never forget screen sharing the
yeah,
cover. So it went up on the big screen in front of everybody who was on the Zoom book launch, and her face was like jaw open with that. by my painting is on a book cover, like she
yeah,
couldn't wait to tell her teacher and her
yeah,
classmates that
yeah.
her art had been featured on a book cover. I mean, and her eyes were huge. It was like, this is a moment she will never forget for her entire
Oh,
lifetime.
I don't think so for her whole life. And it fits so much with the message of the book because we could have figured out a book cover. You had lots of suggestions, and there's certain ways you do it, and certain genres have kind of book covers and all that. But it's like this was right in front of our face.
Yes.
It's right in front of our face. This little
And I'm
girl,
just
10
gonna
years
hold it
old.
up. I just have this little thing on here, but and you can see how beautiful. I mean, this is not a painting that you would expect from a 10-year-old. I mean,
No,
this is not like when we're telling you a 10-year-old painted the cover. This is not like they went to art camp and, had some like, sloppy, and then we're like, yeah, let's use that on the book cover. Like, I would be honest, if it was a terrible painting, I would have said, Tom, we love you. No.
right.
But we were like, this is actually something we could really work with. And our designer, I remember there's this kind of octopus in the middle of it that she
Yeah,
had painted that we were
yeah,
able to sort of cover over with her pattern of the water because we wanted to have a boat
yeah.
horizon. And the way this whole thing really worked out was just beautiful. And it's this unique cover that has a deeper meaning. And you put a dedication, or did we put her on the copyright page or did we do a
Yeah,
dedication?
somewhere on the copyright page, we
Yeah,
did a
so her
little
name is in
paragraph.
there, so every step along the way was a really thoughtful experience, not only from the actual writing being amazingly deep, the 3D poetry, the cover experience, the book launch, and then subsequently speaking on stage at our Book Naples event. It was all just a really beautiful experience. We absolutely loved working with you from beginning to end, and now embarking on a new project soon. But how did you feel after the book launch and once things sort of simmered? Because we did so much up to that point, including launching a new website and consulting and all, it was just like so many things. So now that you've had a little time to process, how are you feeling like looking back at that experience?
Well, it was a little bit of PTSD after the book line, after the whole process. Literally, I was so ragged out. I had to just sort of
I hope
chill.
it wasn't traumatic.
No, it wasn't traumatic. What do I mean? I guess PTSD would be the wrong word to use, wouldn't it? I was emotionally exhausted.
Yeah,
That's
that's
the word.
better.
It's
Yeah.
not PTSD. Sorry about that.
Literary publishing where we'll launch your book and give you
I'll give you
PTSD. That's
PTSD. Yeah, sorry about that. No, I was emotionally exhausted because it was such a beautiful process, all of it. And even I recognized I got such great response from my writing, just giving it out piecemeal, one at a time. But I could see how much better it was through the editing process and how everybody had a piece in that. Some things you would say, right? It's like sitting down on that's the thing about hearing from spirit. The voice is everywhere, which
hmm
is really the whole point of the book. It's everywhere. And it's not just when I sit there for 3 hours and just plug in and I hear something or see something and write it. It's in something you might say. It's in something Heather might say. It's in some I went to yoga, what some of my yoga teachers said. I got a whole poetry piece of something deeper for that. So you have to like just always be listening. And one of the challenges for me was that you guys were so good and professional at what you did, and I could see the book becoming better than I could have ever made it on my own, which is really a testament to what you guys do. And I could see that. Heather goes, well, okay, well, this is a little shallow. Can you fix that? And I'm like, really? And then, I'd let me sit with that a little bit. And then I'd reread it the next day and go, this is a little shallow. I think I need to fix this. So it really truly became a collaborative effort. And it's kind of the highest compliment. Maybe this will make people forget the PTSD comment, but that really you guys made it much better than I could have ever done it on my own. And you really, I guess now that I think about it, right, it makes sense. It's a symbol. We're all connected. You guys have a part. You guys have a creative part in that book. You made it something it wouldn't have been without you. And
Oh,
the most difficult part for the author is kind of no, because some days I would want to go with I just well, Heather's an editor, she's a professional editor, I'll just do what she suggests. And then other days it's like, well, no, I'm the author, I really need to do it how I want to do it. And the truth is there's no formula. That on
yeah.
some days I needed to do some things, I just need to say no, I needed to do it this way, like the cover, right? Initially I was really wanted the cover, and I would have respected your professional opinion if you just said that's really 10-year-old kind of crappy cover. You know what I mean? Eventually, I probably would have come around. But there's something inside you, and sometimes it's like, no, I need this cover. And other times, like, no, you guys are right. No, you're right. I'll let this go. And that's an intuitive decision. It's not a logical decision. You have to feel when what you guys suggest is better and when I really need to stick to my guns, this is really, really important. And it's it's an intuitive decision, and you can't make it ahead of time. You have to feel it. So I honestly feel like this book is like our book. Yes, I'm the author, right? But it really is our book because your guys' energy is in it. Um, yeah, it's just that's how the universe works, right? No man is an island.
Yeah.
You really can't do it without help.
Yeah. I love that. And it's really such a joy for us to be able to work with intuitive authors like yourself because it is this relationship where it's this push and this pull and this, you know, when do I listen to my own intuition and say no, I want it this way? When do I give in and say no, they have an idea that I'm willing to accept? And it's this back and forth and I think that it sharpens. It's like they say iron sharpens iron, that we together get to sharpen one another. And in from my view, as a publisher, and Heather would say this as well, is like we know that you're the boss. The author's always in charge. And so even if the painting was a crappy 10-year-old painting and you really wanted it, at the end of the day, it is your book. Now, we would probably do it kicking and screaming if it was a terrible piece of art because it wouldn't be in the best service of the reader, because we
Right.
don't want the book to appear amateurish. We
Yeah.
don't want to detract our ultimate goal, which is for as many people to read it as possible. But because the painting was really well done, and because we could work with it, we did offer some other, design ideas just as a compare and contrast. Like, are
Mm.
you sure you want this? Because here's some other ideas. And I think even in that process, when you can visually see things side by side, it almost solidifies, no, you know what? I really did want this,
Yeah.
and I think that's to me something to always think about. If you're listening to this podcast and you thought, I need to look for a publisher or, how does it all work? Figure out, is it a team effort? How much are they going to help you? How much input do you get in the final design? How does all that work? Because the relationships that are built or not built, in the case of some other companies, can be very detrimental, because if you don't get input, then that's partly a terrible thing. And if you get the book taken away from you and then you're getting executive orders as to what's going to happen, that's not going to be good either. So I think that there's this back and forth that really made the book so beautiful. And I think that, your name is on it for good reason because you wrote the book. We were just there to help facilitate getting it from, like, the top of the ninth inning to the bottom of the ninth inning. That's the
Yeah.
credit. That's how
Yeah.
much credit I could take. It's like we took a few swings at the bat, but you went around the bases a lot of times. Yeah.
Well, I really do agree that, like, let's say I'd wanted to self-publish the book, it wouldn't have been as good. And honestly, if let's say for some reason somehow I'd gotten to a big publisher and sold 1 million copies or whatever, if they had just taken it, they would have looked at it from a marketing standpoint. How can we sell more books? How are we going to make more? Let's do this. Let's just do the cover. The cover would have never gone through. And let's just do it this way. Even if they'd sold 1 million books, it wouldn't have been as good. It wouldn't have been as good. The collaboration is so beautiful. And that's the message. That's the message. The 10-year-old you you know what I mean? There's some ideas you had, right? I did make a 24-hour rule before I told my wife, I said, Heather said to do this or April said to do this. I really don't like it. And then I realized 24 hours later, it's like, I think I said that. Yeah, they have a point. So,
Hard, it is hard. And I think that with all of us who are creatives, and I'm a creative as well, it's hard to wear the creative hat. And then it's hard to also let somebody else have input on creativity. And, I do, every time I'm in that position of being the one to offer suggestions, I try to do so very carefully because I know I've been in the seat where others have offered suggestions. I remember before I did this little old cocoon book that you've seen. It's just this
yeah.
little booklet, and I sent it to a friend to read. And I just said, would you take a quick read at this and, see if there's any errors or anything and I kept asking, like, did you read it yet? Or, because it's really only, it's like 32 pages and it's like, 20 words per page. It's just a little, she was like, "Oh yeah, I'm getting to it. I'm working on it. I'm working on it." And like she sent it back to me and the whole thing was totally rewritten. I
Huh.
remember I remember feeling like, that's what I asked for.
Yeah.
Because like, I wanted to say it that way,
Yeah.
and she wasn't my editor, and I probably wasn't clear enough about, like, what I all I wanted really was a pat on the back, to be honest with you, like, "This is good." But it's hard to take suggestions, and so you did it so beautifully, and I love that you had the 24-hour rule, and I love that you were willing to let us have input, and I love that it became this beautiful, partnership that's continuing on. So I just want to say thank you so much for trusting us with your beautiful work and for continuing to work with us and for being, such an inspiring spirit whose heart is really in the work to help others, on the long term. I think, I'm extending my gratitude for you about that. And I would encourage each of you who are listening right now to please go to thomashudsonmd.com, where you can check out more about Tom. And you can get his book, Something Deeper 31 Spiritual Poems to Help You Navigate Life. There's some buttons on the website that will take you to where you can purchase the book. Did you have anything final you wanted to say on today's podcast about someone who's maybe looking for more inspiration and intuition or how to cultivate that, or maybe a little encouragement about having confidence to overcome their inner critic? What's coming to you now?
Well, the first thing that came that I wanted to say before we close definitely is that I really feel like once this process started, I felt like the book wrote itself, and I was, I was just privileged to come along for the ride,
Hmm.
and you guys had part, Heather had part, right? It's just this beautiful collaboration, and it does something like that does take on a life of its own.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to just be the vessel for the book and not like get in the way, sort of. Um, so I definitely wanted to say that. I'm trying to remember what your question was now.
No, that's fine. It's just anything, encouragement for a reader, or not a reader, a writer who may be listening, who's fighting with their inner critic, or maybe an encouragement to, tap into their own intuition through writing. Like, what I guess, just if you're, reflecting right now over all we talked about in this past, hour or so, um, what do you think people can take away from this
I
and,
think
feel
that
encouraged?
as we may have talked about, it's almost like your purpose, right? What you love to do, what your purpose, it's always tapping you on the shoulder. I don't know if we were recording when I said we said that or not. It's always tapping you on the shoulder. And I would say just listen, don't fight it, just listen. Right? Your purpose will find you. You won't have to find it. Just don't actively push it away, and just listen for what do you love to do. Your purpose is going to be tied up in that. I did talk to several people at the Book Naples event which made me feel great because oh, I've got this book I've been thinking of writing. I got all this poetry. One person, one attorney had poetry all over her laptop. Like, yeah, I know what you mean, for decades. And people have been thinking of doing a book, but hadn't kind of gotten around to it or had self-doubts or whatever. So it really made me feel good, number one, to be a positive influence that, hey, you can do this. But also number two, that I really wasn't alone, right?
Mhm.
In struggling with, well, people like it, but it's I think I put in the book, if somebody else had written it, I would be raving about it.
Yeah.
But because I wrote it, it's like, well, that's good. It's okay.
Yeah.
But to see how it's not just me. I'm not the only one, right? We all of us struggle with that critic. Uh,
Mhm.
and I would say what comes to me in terms of thinking like we're not going to be here, we're not going to be here forever.
Hmm.
And, when you look back from the end, I don't want to say, gosh, what if I'd done that? You know, if you do
Yeah.
it and you fall on your face, who cares? That's
Yeah.
where life is. I mean, we fall on our face how many times every single day? Literally, that's not a legacy, whatever. I tried to publish a book, it just wasn't the thing. Um, who cares? But if you have something in your heart that you can leave for humanity, you don't want to look back and go, gosh, I wish I'd done that.
Yeah.
So that really helped to kind of, I wouldn't say it didn't drive me, but it inspired me.
Mm.
And I did get to where I felt like when I realized, well, not everybody can write and not everybody can write how I write.
Hmm.
And it does affect people. I did get to where I felt more like it was a duty.
Hmm.
And I know other people feel that too. And I know the inner critic is telling them, yeah, it's good. It's not that good. You can do it
Yeah.
later. You have a real job. Don't rock the boat. You know,
Yep. I always say, I like to think about, someday if I'm blessed with living a long life and I'm, on my deathbed with kids and grandkids around me or whatever, and you're thinking back on things you would regret not doing, I doubt people would regret having written a book that what like you said, whether the book sold a million copies or was just a beautiful experience that they shared with friends and family that they know is going to live beyond them. It's like, I don't think there's regret for doing it. I think we regret the things we don't do,
I
that we know that we could have or should have tried, but we were afraid to do it or we let that inner critic squash us or whatever. So, it's having the courage to do those things that you would not regret having done later.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. Making mistakes, doing things that you mess up, things don't work out, whatever. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Really, nobody
Yeah.
cares. But
Yeah.
it's the things that are really in your heart and that you really have, especially that you have an opportunity to touch others,
Yeah.
because that makes you immortal, right? I
Yeah.
mean, part of us is immortal anyway,
Yeah.
but just like those guys I was talking about who died 80 years ago or whatever, 60 years ago, part of their souls touches my soul.
Hmm.
How does all that work?
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing to think that that's how it works is through one person touching another person through their words, and their deeds and things like that. So, well, it's been a joy to have you on the show. I know we could keep going because we always have so much to talk about. And for those who have not yet, please go to thomashudsonmd.com and pick up his book, Something Deeper: 31 Spiritual Poems to Help You Navigate Life. It's been so beautiful connecting with you today. You're such a beautiful spirit, and your heart to help others just shines through. Thank you again for being on the show.
Thanks, April. I enjoyed it. Bye bye.
Bye.